What's up everyone, how you guys doing? And today we will be talking about the 2.0 standard NW Agent Selector that's coming soon with the launch of the anniversary patch. So without further ado, let's begin. Alrighty, so before we begin, just establish some disclaimers because everyone has a different reasons to select a specific agent or even W engine, right? Some players are completionists, they want to get every character, and maybe they have a missing Rina in their account and they just want to pull a Rina just to complete the entire set. But there are others who don't really care about that and just want to go for vertical investments with Mindscapes, and I understand that. And so, but besides that, right, this video is to give players realistic expectations of the units and W engines so that they do not pull for the wrong one, right? They at least know what they're getting into when they're selecting these units, but ultimately pull for who you like. If there's a character in this video that's very low on the ranking, but you still want to pull for it, go ahead. Right, Zenless can still be completed with these characters, but do know that some characters may need higher investments to clear content, right? Realistically, power creep does happen, so it's something for players to take note of. All right, so let's talk about the first agent, who is Lycaon. Now, with these summaries, I'm going to be pretty brief because there's so much to talk about. But basically, with Lycaon, his basic can be held to chain 3 attacks in, and basically the held versions do increase damage and days. And the same can also be seen with his special as well, right? The EX does give him invulnerability with this held version, whereas the special just gives him increased interruption resistance. The burst, however, very high days multiplier, as you expect from an S rank stun agent, whereas his core skill gives 25% ice rest down. It's very strong for ice DPS, while the additional ability gives increased stun damage multiplier. Well, so for some of the pros of Lycaon, right, as mentioned, as an S rank unit, his days multipliers are very high, being able to make enemies get stunned very fast, and also does make the entire team do more damage, right? The increased stun multipliers from the additional ability, and also the decreased ice resistance, which makes him excel the best in ice teams. Obviously, Miyabi, Hugo, and Joe. And he can be played two ways, right? Mainly can be played as an on-field stunner, but he can also support the main DPS coming in when he assists, and then doing some days, but then he can switch out. And lastly, he's also never mind. Okay, anyways. So for some of the cons, so as you can probably expect, Lycaon is very close range, right? Which means that especially with his basic chain, right, the 3 hold attacks, he can be suspect to damage if you don't dodge in time, and at the same time he can still feel time from the main DPS, right? Not every main DPS wants to share the spotlight, or they're pretty greedy. For example, a character like Hugo. So yeah, definitely that's one thing to consider. And at the same time, while he doesn't have zero use, he does have limited use outside of ice teams, so it's not a general stun unit as compared to a character like, in the future we're gonna get Jufufu. That being said, what are some of his pool considerations? Now, obviously, if you have Ellen, Hugo, and Miyabi, his value goes a lot higher. But that being said, as you see from the third point, Lighter can be a good replacement because Lighter also increases the damage of ice characters, while Jufufu is going to be a more versatile stun unit, not only making good use of the fire element, but also providing good damage bonus to things like chain attacks. Well, if you're thinking about vertically investing into Lycaon though, the M1 does give additional days. So something for players to consider, right? Obviously, it's a huge part of his kit, and that means that you're breaking your enemies a lot faster. Alright, so let's talk about the other Victoria housekeeping member, who is Rina Electric Support. She's a pen ratio buffer for her team, and also these buffs can give up to 30% where the bang boosts are on field. That's when you know that the buffs are active. The ultimate, while not being the main part of a kit, does give the team 10 energy, an additional 20 for the next switched in character, who Rina as a support character is able to quick assist once the ultimate hits an enemy. At the same time, the core additional ability does increase the shock duration from 10 to 13 seconds and also increases electric damage as well. Now, generally, Rina is one of the easiest characters to play because you know that her buffs are active whenever you see the bang boost on field, and these do last pretty long. Now these buffs are also very general and work with most characters, and also helps the electric teams a lot, especially for anomaly teams, like for example Grace teams. As mentioned, her durations are quite long, so doesn't need to be switched in as often, especially if you get her M1. And she has also two other reasons why she's also very valuable. It's her 2 bang boost, of course. That being said, some of the cons, she does have very long animations, especially when you're further away from the enemy, so that can be a little bit of a hamper sometimes. And also, when the bang boosts are on field, you also can't use any abilities besides the basic or the skill, which brings the bang boost back, so that can be a little bit annoying at times. That being said, the bang boosts also need to be on field for the buffs, which is a big consideration of players who maybe want to spend more time on their like attack agents or there's stun agents, for example. At the same time, because of the way rupture agents work in 2.0, the release of yixuan, they ignore defense basically. So pen ratio, which is basically ignoring defense, does not stack, and that basically means that you can't use Rina with like yixuan or any future rupture agents when they are released. So what are some pool considerations? Well, the first is her M1. If you already have Rina, her M1 is a huge upgrade, longer duration of 5.5 seconds. And also the passive buff increases to 130%, which is absolutely massive. And so if in a case where you have all the agents, Rina is basically the best M1 in the game. Pre-M1, however, there are better and cheaper supports available. These include characters like Lucy, like Nicole, and basically, and even like for ice teams, so Kaku also works very well with Ellen Joe, and even in anomaly teams, Seth does work pretty good. That being said, she is still a good support and very easy to use, and that can be a big consideration for players to pull for her. Now, coming over to DPSs, the first DPS we will talk about is Soldier 11, Fire Attack Agent from the Oboe squad, basically crit based DPS. Basically, her whole mechanic revolves around the fire infusion, which is the fire suppression. Basically, her time basic attacks, that means you must time it at the right moment. It gives your attack fire infusion instead of physical, and then it also gets the fire suppression from the EX special, chain attack, and ultimate. This basically means they don't have to time it anymore. Basically, you get the fire infusion for either 15 seconds or 8 hits, whichever comes first. And then the core passive powers up those basic or dash attacks that have been infused, and at the same time the additional ability gives more fire damage, which increases when the enemy is stunned, which means that you want to run a stun agent with her. Now, pros, once you learn the timing, she is a very simple agent to play, right? Very straightforward. You just do lots of damage, and obviously she works great with stunners like Koleda and Lighter, right? At the same time, her core passives and ability is pretty easy to trigger. She generally is very good against single target enemies, and it's just basically Tanjiro, right? The Sundance. Cons, unfortunately, that means that she is quite teammate dependent, especially she needs a stunner like Lighter or Koleda, because especially Lighter, right? If you have Lighter, he makes her a lot better because of the fire damage bonus that she provides. And at the same time, because the only available Oboe member as of now is a Trigger, which doesn't really synergize well with Soldier 11, there isn't anyone to trigger that her additional ability besides fire units, which means that Lighter and Koleda are almost must-haves unless you're using a character like Lucy. That being said, her best teams also don't have grouping unless you bring a character like Nicole, and at the same time, right, she doesn't take enemies out as easily because of her single target nature. And then lastly, for some of the cons, well, Evelyn exists, and so depending on how many DPS characters you have, the pool consideration for, or the selection consideration for Soldier 11 depends, especially if you have Evelyn. Now, while Soldier 11 is still able to clear, Evelyn is by far a stronger agent. And so there's that. And like I said, she's not bad, but there are better and easier options to use. That being said, if you're going for vertical investments, the M2 is actually pretty good, giving you up to 36% more damage when triggering fire suppression. Now going over to Koleda, Fire Stun Battlebot unit, her EX special, chain attack and outs grants this ability called Fire Furnace, and what it basically does is enhance the basic and basically means that you do more damage from your basic chain. The second and fourth hit also combos into your special for faster and stronger damage. And lastly, the core passive increases the days on the EX special or enhanced basic, while the ability increases, or I'm sorry this is blocked, but this is ability. The additional ability increases the chain attack damage when enemy is stunned, which means that if you don't have lighter, it can actually be a pretty good replacement for Evelyn teams. So obviously the pros is that she's an incredible burst stunner. I believe she is, up to this day, even with all the limited units, still the fastest stunner in the game. And as mentioned, she increases chain attack damage, which you would generally do once the agents are, once the enemies are stunned, right? And as well, right, she does have a combo with Bend. I believe it's still the only combo in the game for stronger or enhanced abilities. And also when she's using her enhanced basic, she basically gained iframes when she's using them. So she does provide a lot of flexibility and also does do a lot of stunning, so that she's able to stun the enemies, that you can able to do more damage. Now, some of the cons is that her animations do take pretty long, which means that sometimes can be animation locked. And at the same time, her non-enhanced basics, that is not enhanced by the furnace fire, are noticeably weaker. And also she has less value, just like what's his name? Just like Lycaon, he has less values outside of a niche, which is fire teams. And the problem is that the fire stun category is very saturated now, with lighter already being released and jufufu coming out with the second half of 2.0. So obviously, full considerations, it does have higher value if you have a fire DPS without lighter or jufufu, but in the inverse, her value does go down if you have either of them, or you're planning to pull for jufufu. While she's not viable, obviously she can still work outside of fire teams because she can still stun very easily. That being said, you lose out on the additional ability if you don't meet the requirement. As for Mindscapes, her M2 tend to be her best, which basically gives her an energy refund of up to 60 energy, which means more EX specials, right? This obviously works well because she wants to have her Furnace Fire ability active more often than not, and also synergizes very well with her W engine. Going over the next attack character, who is Nekomata, physical attack from the Cunning Hairs, the only S Rank Cunning Hairs member. Well, it's because, Hoyoverse decided not to make NB a Cunning Hairs member, but hey, it is what it is. Anyways, the basic hole slashes through enemies, right? She has two versions. The basic one slashes through enemies, which does activate her signature weapon quite more easily. But basically, both versions give 33% chance to hit again once the end of the attack goes. Now, through her core passive, it does increase her dodge, counter, and quick assist damage massively, which is the main part of her gameplay. Right, the main part of her gameplay is the dodge counter, which means that she's very reliant on enemies hitting her or trying to hit her in this case. Now, the additional ability that she has does increase EX special, typo error over there, after you land an assault, which is the physical anomaly. And lastly, her as a attack agent, he does have high damage on her ultimate. Now, the pros of Nekomata. Now, first and foremost, she's one of the best agents to deal with mobs because of the way her abilities, like her whole basic and her ultimate works, and also has high mobility due to her dodge reliance playstyle. At the same time, because her abilities her additional ability requires the Cunning Hairs, these teammates are given for free, namely MB or Nicole. And she does also have a very cheap EX special, which means they can use it more often, and also Cat. That being said, her core passive lasts for quite a short while, 6 seconds, which means that it can be a little bit hard to upkeep and it requires you to do dodge, counter, and quick assist. And this is another big problem when the enemy is stunned, because generally you want your enemies to be stunned to do more damage, but Nekomata's value actually drops a lot in this because obviously the enemy is stunned, you can't do dodge counters. And that means that a teammate, support like Nicole, has to provide the quick assist for Nekomata to come in and then refresh her core passive stack. And because of the synergies that she has, it doesn't make for low vertical investments outside of the Cunning Hairs members, right? You could probably swap like a Nicole for Astro Yao, or even a stun MB for another stun unit, but they do have lower synergy. And generally, they it's just harder to play around and vertically invest with her with teammates. Now, generally, Nekomata is seen as a low value DPS, especially if you have several limited agents in your roster. And she does have similar playstyle to Jane Doe, while Jane Doe is obviously anomaly and doesn't do crit and everything. They are more of the dodge counter, very fast playstyle kind of characters. Now, that being said, if you do have a signature weapon, which is the steel cushion, the M1 actually works very well in tandem with it, right? When enemies are stunned, all enemies are considered to be, all attacks are considered to be hitting from the back, which helps trigger the second part of her W engine. And at the same time, it also reduces the physical rest by 16% when hitting from the back. And so the M1 is amazing, especially if you do have the steel cushion signature W engine. Now, last but not least is Grace, who is Electric Anomaly from Balabog. Now, Grace basically is another simple unit to understand, where her basic and dash attacks through the core's passive gives zap stacks, and once you max it out at 8, you increase the anomaly build up for Electric by using a special by 130% at max stacks. And the EX special throws 2 grenades instead, which means that it's double the damage. And the additional ability increases the next shock triggered damage. So you can see that Grace works very well in anomaly teams and also works well in electric or shock based teams. And some of the pros is that she's also one of the more mobile characters, because when using her attacks, you can choose which direction to jump into. And just like Nekomata has a very cheap EX special. And as an anomaly unit, and this is generally the case for most of them, they are more reliant on their stats than ability levels. Yes, you do want to level up some things like a skill and stuff like that, or a special, for example. But generally, she does rely more on the stats than anything else, and works obviously in both Disorder and Shock teams. That being said, the way that Shock works is that when you apply Shock on a shocked enemy, they actually don't take additional damage, they just refresh the duration. And so for the additional ability of Grace, you do require a Disorder team to get the additional damage. So basically, for example, you're playing Grace with like Bernice, right? You shock, then you burn with Bernice, then you apply shock again to get the additional damage. And so she's a lot less optimal as a solo DPS. Even on electric based teams, most people try to run Anton or even Harumasa with her. And the thing is that the anomaly class is very bloated. Obviously, we have Miyabi, but you also have characters like Jane Doe, Yanagi, which obviously, Yanagi directly competes with her. You also have Bernice, Vivian, and also Piper as well. So it's a very crowded a class in the game, and so Grace does fall off depending on how many characters of that class you have. That said, she does get better with most anomaly units. The better the anomaly units are being released, she does get better. But once you start pulling for more limited characters like Yanagi, Vivian, Bernice, the lower Grace values becomes. That being said, if you do want to invest into her Mindscapes, M2 does increase shock application and also electric damage because of the decrease in the anomaly buildup and also the decrease in electric rest. So this is my ranking of the standard characters. As mentioned, dependent on your roster, because different rosters will have different like pools and like different mindscapes and stuff like that. And so Rina for me is still number one because she works with most teams. Lycaon tends to be number two. Lycaon is a lot more flexible than Koleda in some cases, but Koleda is also a pretty good option. Although I would say that Koleda definitely has gone down, especially with the imminent arrival of jufufu in about 3 to 4 weeks time. And then as for 4 to 6, I was debating it for quite a bit, but generally I don't think it really matters that much. For me, I put number 4 as Soldier 11 because even though she competes with Evelyn, she's only competing with Evelyn, whereas Grace has more competition in her role, not only with Yanagi, but also because anomalies are so intertwined that even characters like Bernice and also Vivian competes with her role. And last but not least is Nekomata, who I think a lot of people will agree with Nekomata. And like I said, Nekomata is still a pretty decent character, but you do have to put in more effort, more investments into her for her to work. As for Mindscape, in case like you have like all characters, or let's say you want to hyper invest, for me, Rina's M1 is undoubtedly the best. Mindscape because of the huge quality of life and increase in damage. I was debating between Lycaon M1 and Koleda M2, and ultimately I put Lycaon M1 first, or not first, like ahead, because I think that Lycaon's one is a lot more easier to activate, and Koleda's one does have a 45-second cooldown. The 60 energy restoration does take a while. And generally in most content, he only casts by once or twice, which can be enough, right? This once or twice refund of energy can be enough. So I think Lycaon M1 and Koleda M2 is like kind of like very close. That being said, Koleda's one's at M2, which means you had to pull for the M1 first. Koleda's M1 is pretty bad. That being said, Soldier 11's M2 can also be pretty good. I debated between putting Grace 4th or 5th. In there I put Grace at M2 because ultimately, like I said, I think Soldier 11 does benefit more from the M2 than Grace. And then 4-6 is Nekomata. But I think in this case, Nekomata's M1 is a lot closer than with her character ranking itself. And do know it is the same. It is the same, but you know, it's kind of, I think this is kind of true. And as I mentioned, if you have like M1 Rina, then your considerations are a lot more different. Now, when it comes to W engine, there's only one answer. Brimstone. Okay, you know what? I'm just kidding. Obviously, Brimstone's not the only option. It is one of the best options, but let's talk about all the W engines in brief. So my W engine ranking is as such: Brimstone at number 1, followed by Hellfire Gears, Future Compiler, then Weeping Cradle, Restraint, and then Steel Cushion. Now, obviously, once again, if you do have like more than 1 or 2 signature weapons for attack, then maybe Brimstone wouldn't be as valuable, because we do have alternatives like the Mercato Desire, for example, if you've done the event. That being said, Hellfire Gears and Future Compiler do also have good alternatives in Steam Oven, the Fossil W engine. Then Future Compiler, we did talk about it. We did talk about the Weeping Gemini and stuff like that. Weeping Cradle, I'll put it a little bit lower. I think it's a weapon that people either overrate or underrate. I think it's just middle of the park because it is good for Rina, but it makes Rina super good. And then Restraint and Steel Cushion, I think there are way better alternatives, even for their selected agents. And so that's that for this video. Hope you guys like it. Try to give as much context in the characters as I can in as summarized fashion as possible, because if not, this video will take too long. That being said, right, if you guys enjoyed it, thumbs up if you're in, thumbs up, share, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And do note that I stream live on Twitch. Link in the description below. Let me know who you are selecting, or which character and which weapon. And good luck for your yixuan pools when the patch goes live. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe, be good to yourselves and the people around you. See you guys next time. Bye bye.